Hello, and welcome to another TFT mini. This is episode 4. This is where we're gonna do our first foray into a unit. It's not really a deep dive, or it's not really a shallow dive either. It's like it's sort of like a moderate dive, and in the middle dive on Captain Rex. We're going to be spending about 15 minutes to talk about the venerable Rex. We both remember him well from a previous time in Star Wars Legion, where some would say that he was oppressive in terms of the the game that he enabled. Mike, you were a part of the Captain Rex suppression movement. Do you feel any regrets?
Regret? No, 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 no.
That is a
You know,
rhetorical question. I know you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
feel any regrets.
absolutely not.
No. But yeah, we're gonna talk about Rex. So we're gonna show the unit card up on the screen. We do trust y'all to be able to read it. We're gonna be mostly focusing on the strategy, but when it comes to the unit card with Rex, I think the things that stand out to me are, hey, he was our first tactical one before we even got our troopers, and we realized pretty quickly that that's pretty good for clone troopers. And
Turns
the
out,
Yeah, it turns out. And then the other two things that I would highlight on him, funny enough, uh, the are the fact that one, he has scouting party, which is an incredible keyword, and we'll get into why that is so incredible when we talk about the strategies with him. But the other important point that I feel is good to point out is the fact that he has 5 health with non-surging dice without impervious or immune pierce to anything. And that goes to show that he can go down really fast. He also only has courage 2. So that's going to get into the strategy in terms of being careful. Mike, do you have anything on his unit card that you want to sort of point out about our dear Captain Rex?
just that his attack, I think people underrate his attack. His attack is very good. It's
It's very
it's it's
good.
like quite excellent. It is as long as you have two targets, it is Darth Vader's lightsaber without the pierce. Like
It
and
It
it
is
surges.
it is especially good against like your enemy core units.
Yes.
I feel like when if there's a situation where I can move up Rex to like hate on a couple of fleet troopers that were trying to like hide over on the side, he is so good at doing that, and he just like obliterates them.
He's just like, oh, you got two rebel squads that are like just, whether they're cores or commandos or whatever they are.
Yeah.
He just, it's like, I hope you don't mind losing 4 to 6 models, like, uh,
Now, if I had my wishes, they would have given Rex melee range with his blasters also. Sadly, they left him with the 2 red melee dice, the same as the generic clone commander, which feels a little bit off, but whatever. He can't have everything. They
yeah,
did make a certain command card a lot better, which we're going to get to in just a second. But yeah, like the gunslinger, don't underrate it. Like the fact that it doesn't have pierce will sometimes make people go, this is a crappy hero weapon, but it's 6 red dice that are surging
yeah. In a
with
world
sharpshooter.
where everybody's got to be on POIs, like you're pretty
Yeah,
reasonably
you're gonna be
triggering
able to shoot
gunslinger.
stuff.
Yeah.
Uh,
Um,
of course you might die right after shooting that stuff,
you
but that
you
gets
might,
into
you
that.
might.
Yeah.
Uh, and unfortunately for him, his engagement range means that backup is kind of out of the picture. So,
Backup
um,
prevents your opponent's snipers, which don't exist very much in today's game anyway, from sniping him. Which, to be fair, that did used to be a huge problem for Rex, was being
it
sniped.
yes.
So at least that's not such a thing anymore. But let's get to his command cards quickly. I think we'll just go 3, 2, 1. So his 3 pip, it can be an opener, like it can be a decent opener, especially if your opponent has enough long range where like those true surge tokens will actually mean something on defense for you. But ideally, this is done later on because he both recovers and he gets inspire. Ideally, this is done when you're going to be able to like get some stuff out of that to reduce your own suppression problems. But like, do you have any thoughts about how to use a 3 pip?
I do. I would recommend not bringing it. Unless the only way that you should be bringing this card is that if you would be playing assault instead.
Yeah.
So if you are in a situation where your other 3 pip is um not Attack of the Clones, you should just play Attack of the Clones instead of this card. I think Attack of the Clones is much better than this card. And the reason for that is you get to put surge tokens where you want them. And that
Yeah,
allows you to not have to deal with the restriction on sharing surge tokens between units, which is a very big deal. And it is the main limitation of this card.
that's fair. And we should also mention that if you have Anakin in your list, you actually probably should have Assault, because that one lets you put an order on Anakin.
Well, I
That's
would, I would, I would back that up with saying that that is the one scenario where I do think that Payne foresees the initiative on as an
okay.
upgrade.
Yeah,
It's very
that's
where
fair.
that,
It's something to
yeah.
consider for sure. Moving on, his two pip. Boy, it ain't what it used to be. Yeah, speaking of talking about like reviving old traumas regarding Captain Rex in the old game. Just for those out there who don't know, just ask a veteran Legion player if you want to see their eyes glass over, and the horrors come over them once again. So the fact that it requires you to take an aim action in the current iteration of the card, it does limit it, and I would argue that it's even more limited than it used to be because now a move action will actually like get you more range than this card will. Because if you're moving at the edge of the template, you're gonna like you can turn a range 4 into a range 3 into a range 2, I should say, in edge cases. But this card obviously is never gonna do that. There are a couple utilities for this. I think it's fairly limited. Mike, what do you think is the utility for it?
Utility for this is you're sitting on a POI, you don't want
Correct.
to move. You've listened to our last episode
Yep,
about how that's
exactly.
the only time you should take hammer dodges, and you are in that scenario, and you're like, okay, range four would be really good right here. That unfortunately makes this card pretty unique in
It's a situational card.
situate. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's not something. It's very much a card that I think in a lot of hands is going to be like your sixth command card, so to speak, where it's like either this one or some other one is just like not going to get used this game. Because again, you should really only be using it if you are happy with where that unit is. I can promise you that getting one extra range is not going to be worth that unit, like not contesting later on, when it could have just moved up to basically get the same amount of to get even slightly more range out of the shot. So let's move on to the command card that I think we'll agree is certainly the most useful one that Rex has, which is his one pick comic captain. Uh, you know, this is the reverse of his two pip. This is a lot better than it used to be. Because in the old days, you could go and melee Rex with your naked B1 unit, and then you just turn off Call Me Captain, and the clone player would be sad.
It's better and worse. You also can't split fire and trigger it multiple times anymore.
That is true. That is
Um,
true. That was fun back in the day.
that was absurd back in the day. I would just like bring an arc trooper unit up, split fire three ways, and
Ah, man,
get
yeah,
get an
that
extra
was sick.
nine red dice. Um, maybe not fair, but very sick for sure. Yeah, I mean this card is still very good, and I would say that if you're bringing Rex, like this should definitely be in your command hand, like always. This card has the ability to flip games by itself as long as you can keep Rex alive.
And obviously, it matters more the more activations you have.
Yes.
But yeah, it's incredible. It it especially feels good in like a spammy-ish 501st list where all of a sudden your strike teams that have at least lived to the later rounds have moved up to the point that they're shooting their red and three blacks, but all of a sudden that becomes four reds and three blacks with lethal one, and it just feels insane sometimes the amount of extra damage you can get out of this. Like they're in the grand scheme of things, I think that it is technically the command card that can result in the most possible extra damage from a single command card if everything aligns correctly and you get like everybody to add their shots in there.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the way that you should look at this is that if you can trigger it once, it's sort of like mostly triggering Son of Skywalker's effect. If you can
Yeah.
trigger it twice, it's definitely better. And if you can trigger it any more than that, which you probably can, it's like
It's the most
way
damaging
better.
command card in the game.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If you can get if he survives long enough for you to trigger this more than twice, you're feeling really good about your position on the board.
And it's wild how different it is now where if he's engaged with like a single B1, then you're just like so thrilled because then he can't be shot to get rid of him, which is often the way that you deal with this command card right now because again Rex is fairly killable, something important to remember. Okay, so general strategy wise, um, I think that the most important thing to talk about in my opinion is scouting party.
Absolutely.
Um,
That is the reason to take Rex. If you
yeah.
are not going to utilize scouting party, you should look for a different commander.
Scouting party, I think the most obvious use case for this is Bad Batch.
Hmm.
Scouting party turns Bad Batch from scary into an utter nightmare in certain game board scenarios.
Most scenarios.
Yeah, and but like there's other great examples too, especially now that we have the Ahsoka upgrade, but also even fives and weirdly enough, Anakin. Um, and like I say weirdly enough because you might think that, well, he can have prepared positions, so why wouldn't you just do that? But the fun part about scouting party is that you don't have to tell your opponent where Anakin is going to be at the very start of the game.
Yep.
And so instead of doing prepared positions, he can just do a speed two move. This is also where I would mention that Rex is one of the relatively few instances where I would say that recon intel is usually worth it. Even though it is 8 points, that is 8 points to get an extra speed one worth of move for 3 units.
Or
Uh,
five.
or five, that's right. Yeah, Mike, explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so now that you can super squad clone squads, you can essentially give scouting party to the relative value of four
Yeah.
squads as
Yes.
opposed to just two, right? Which is definitely it's a thing, getting essentially two extra squads scout by putting them in super squads is a thing that you can do.
Yep.
Um, as we have seen in Ollie Dyer's latest monstrosity of a clone list.
That's right. Yeah, check out the mid-May episode of Notorious Scoundrels where we cover Shadow Collective if you're curious about that one. Um, yeah, and otherwise, like just from a general perspective, Rex, like I think we talked before, he can benefit from backup very early on, but then after that, he's a range two character. He's not going to benefit from it much. Um, it is true that like him sharing his aim tokens is a consideration when you think about like where you're putting him, but that should never be like the main consideration. The main consideration is that like once he gets out onto the board, like I basically think of him as an operative,
Yeah.
more or less. And so you're thinking about like where are the points that he can contest uh, while being relatively safe. I think that he's generally best off as more of a flanker. Try to keep him away from from their Jedi, especially because there are a few things that are more attractive to like a Count Dooku than a Rex who happens to have the same number of health as the number of dice in Count Dooku's lightsaber, and he's just going to be looking over there as an easy target to just like get rid of very quickly. What else would you say about just like the general uses for Rex?
I mean, I think that during the your opening two turns, he should be an aim battery, right? Like he should be
Yeah,
giving whatever you're scouting up that has like range three. He
as
should be
he's
shit.
moving up to
Yeah,
the place where he needs to be.
right.
Yeah.
Like that's the nice thing about him having tactical. He can kind of be like a pseudo Padme exemplar from previous
Hmm.
edition. Um, but yeah, after it's time to get on POIs, you should be trying to gunsling with this guy as often as possible. And I would say if you can set up a situation where you can double move into something that's not very lethal and put him into a melee situation on an important POI so that you can set up that call me captain, that is the like ace play that you are looking for with Rex is
Yeah.
I wanna go melee but not attack a unit at the end of a turn, play call me captain, put my opponent in a really awkward situation, and have them dig themselves out of it.
Yep.
That is a game winning play if
Yep.
you're able to pull it off.
Yeah, that allows him to be worth like many more than the points that you're actually paying for him. Speaking of which, I think that in talking about upgrades very quickly, because there's not that much to consider in my opinion. I think there's recon intel, and then in some lists, you may want to put improvised orders on him just to get a little bit of order control. Is that it, Mike?
I could see maybe a case for strict orders if you are like taking like a clone commander and fives and stuff. Maybe,
Maybe.
um, if we end up in a suppression heavy metagame, lead by example is not terrible. But yeah, I think generally improvised orders is the only other upgrade you should really be putting on him. Don't put offensive push on him. Uh, I know that it's tempting because it's like he's got a recover card. He's got
Yeah,
way good enough dice and he shares enough aim tokens
that's
as it
right.
is.
It's still not worth 6 points. Yeah, even though
Um,
he does have a recover card.
so I think the only other thing that you might consider is up close and personal. Um, I personally don't think it's worth it generally, but it is a thing where he can share the dodge tokens if you get him into a situation where he's gunslinging every turn. That can, if you generate 6 to 8 dodge tokens with that over the course of the game, like that is worth it.
That is fair. That is fair. It is a little bit of a high risk because again, if he gets tapped before he activates, then he's not going to have any dodge tokens, and once again, he's very killable. And so, yeah, that's sort of what scares me about spending 8 points on up close and personal. Like in theory, it's definitely very strong. But I usually just don't have enough faith that I'm truly going to be able to keep him alive long enough to get the utility that I'd actually want out of those dodges.
If
Uh,
you're concerned about that, why don't we talk very briefly about stims? Because
oh,
stims on the call
interesting.
me captain turn is actually, I think, kind of reasonable.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. I've never really thought about that. And to a certain extent, it like makes him an even juicier target.
Yeah,
Uh,
no doubt.
that again does not have impervious or any natural surging, or he doesn't even carry natural surges with him, right? Like he needs to rely on either his 3 pip or neighboring clone infantry to get those to him because he doesn't have aggressive tactics anymore. Sad face. Uh,
RIP.
yeah. But hey, maybe that's a reason why Stims is maybe worth more considering, because it can actually like keep him alive and in the game longer. And it is always a little bit satisfying when you force your opponent to put 2 dice into an already dead unit in order to, or 2 wounds, I should say, into an already dead unit in order to just prevent them from continuing to contribute attack dice on his pseudo fire support shots.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely,
Uh,
I don't know. I'm not gonna do it, but there can be a case
Yeah,
made, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. So yeah, Rex, he's just like sort of one of those fairly efficient mid-major units that still has a lot of utility, even if he's not the nightmare that he used to be. Sad face, but yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like what we do, consider checking out the Patreon, and we will see you on the next mini.